Okay, so just created, there we go. Should be going. Let's see where we go. Okay, do you see anything yet? Okay, all right. Let me see when we go live right now. Use that. Got it. Start sending us your data. I did do that. Um, yeah, that looks normal. Um, yeah, well, we were doing it earlier, so it was actually working. I'm just trying to figure out why. Okay, there are people in chat. And why isn't it showing up? Your channel. There's the dot. It says it's live. All right, it is live. Okay, everybody, how's it going? I guess this is working. Yeah, yeah. We're not pros. We're not pros at streaming. So, this is we're going to do a talk about the FPS documentary that you've been making, and I think you said that you've got some questions, and which is great. I love it. Now, for people that don't know about this FPS documentary, should we show the trailer first so people can kind of see what's going to be in it? You think that'll start it? All right. Let me get that thing going because it's a really cool video. All right, everybody, check this out.
John, there's no sound and data is needed. John, there's no sound and data is needed. There's no sound on the video and data is needed.
What?
There's no sound on the video and data is needed.
Can't hear me.
There is no sound on the video and
Really?
data is needed.
Oh,
For you, just say something like that.
have come from first-person shooters. Answer. People have gone above and beyond everything that we did, and the world's better for it.
It's important that people make the things that they burn to make.
The most badass video games ever made. This is FPS.
Come get some.
It works.
I don't want to rip your head off and shit down your neck, so help us out on Indiegogo. Help fund this FPS documentary. Fantastic.
Let's rock.
The opportunity to create a new medium of expression comes along once a century.
The very earliest version was a maze.
That first-person perspective just captivated.
The closest thing you can be to being in reality.
I always had a vision of wanting to be inside the world and being able to freely move around.
It was really cool because I had not seen that perspective on a computer monitor before.
I was like, wow, this is the future of video gaming.
How do you want your audience to react to this character? Do you want to see them, or do you want to be them?
Why don't we just make a 3D version of Castle Wolfenstein?
Coolest thing I had ever seen in my entire life.
It blew my mind that I actually got to be there. Eye level. Oh god.
Descent has 360-degree rotation.
The drunken missiles,
Bounce around on mouse pads.
turn yourself into a dog.
I heard about the BFG. You know what that stands for?
Big fucking gun.
Oh shit!
Doom was such a statement.
Just hit like a freight train.
Playing that network was just mind-blowing.
When you move, a little message went out to everybody.
We pioneered online gaming.
We fight against other clans.
Play over a local area network.
They're all over the net. There's servers running 24 hours.
You have to call each other. What's the IP for your server?
I remember the magic of that moment.
Understanding that we were in the same world.
Watching the victor's feet run back and forth in front of you. Quake was such a big revelation. It was amazing looking.
Originally, a lot more like a role-playing game.
The hands in GoldenEye, of course, are all boxes because they have to hold guns.
Nintendo says don't try and do greedy first-person shooters. We kind of just ignored that.
We came up with a system of double kill, multi-kills.
Tom Clancy said, if you do the game, I'll do the book.
I wanted the individual team members to be believable.
We wanted to do something that felt alive and real, and you are a part in it.
Fear was supposed to feel like an action movie.
We wanted to give people a planetary battle.
They hadn't seen anything like it before.
You were Duke, and he was a badass.
I'm looking good.
When Half-Life came out, it changed everything.
It wasn't the story, it was the way the story was told.
We had something special with Halo. We had to build the greatest game ever.
This character felt like it could tackle an army.
The essence of a great first-person shooter
These kick-ass weapons.
A world that sucks you into the experience.
I want to be a badass. Going to these events with just a whole bunch of people who just want to play video games. It was like my people.
First-person shooters helped us get us to where we are.
Storytelling advancements have come from first-person shooters. Answer. People have gone above and beyond everything that we did, and the world's better for it.
It's important that people make the things that they burn to make.
The most badass video games ever made. This is FPS.
Come get some.
I don't want to rip your head off and shit down your neck, so help us out on Indiegogo. Help fund this FPS documentary. Fantastic.
That was awesome. I love Duke at the end, which you get to see if you beat the game. That was awesome. That was great. I know, so great, so 80s. Yeah, it was. Yep. Hold on. What? Oh, okay. Just a second. They say I can't hear you, and I think I know why. Just a second. This is all fun times with doing streaming. Let me kill this. Yeah. Okay. Hopefully that does it. Okay. Okay. So hopefully people can we hear? People can say that they can hear David. David has no audio. No. What'd they say? Can't hear David. Okay, let me try and uh, get this going. Okay, this is let me do an audio capture of yeah. Oh yeah, you're fine because I can hear you. It's just me hearing. You know what? I wonder if this ever worked. Okay, let me. We tested, but I don't know if we tested audio. So let me try to get this going here. All right. I'm guessing this probably works. Let me see. Does anyone hear David talking? You say something, David? Can you text? Yeah, it's not. I could. All right. You got to add desktop audio. This does desktop audio right there. Let me. Okay. Just a second. What is that? Okay, can you talk? See, can you hear me?
I can't hear you.
Oh, okay. Let me get my. I love this.
No, you suddenly
okay.
gone silent.
Yeah, Can you hear me now?
There you are. Yeah.
All right. Great. Now we have to see if people can hear you.
Oh, let's wait. I was just saying Duke Nukem quotes and Doom quotes. My favorite being the whole time. That's all I was saying.
On the wall.
That's
Let's
right.
See. Robot quality. Is that what somebody said? It's robot.
Oh, I sound like an alien now.
Do they? Okay, Dave sounds like an alien. A bit distorted. Okay, let me figure out how to get that.
It's a good thing that's not my normal tone of voice, or I'd be highly, highly offended.
Yeah. What are you calling me? Yeah. Oh, wait a minute. There we go. Yeah, I was. Hopefully this. Go ahead and talk.
Testing 1 2 3.
That should sound better, right? Let me see.
Doom is the best FPS forever, and if you disagree, fight me in Doom. Because I'm kind of.
He's a battle mech. Oh, it's echoed. Okay, let me figure out the.
Am I an
Bam.
alien? That's the real question. I
Okay.
can't answer that now.
That's
I
it.
give away too much.
Got it. Okay. Okay, sounds perfect now.
Sounds perfect now.
Yes.
It was that dose of Argent energy. That's what it was. I just needed more Argent energy.
Sorry, everyone. we'll
That's how
figure it
these
out.
live streams go, man. You got almost everything looks perfect, and then the rubber meets the road, right? You got.
This is the first time we've done a YouTube live stream. Normally it's Twitch. So yeah, so the documentary, you guys started it on Indiegogo, right? Was it started there?
Yeah. So right now we're running the Indiegogo campaign. This is kind of like a second chance. If you missed our Kickstarter from last summer, this is an opportunity to still get in on the ground floor of it. Because, last summer, when we started, we hadn't done any interviews yet. And so it was just a gameplay montage that was basically our way of saying, we're going to cover all this stuff. So give us money so we can go out and talk to people and do the interviews. And that's what I've been leading the team on. I was asked to be director last summer and kind of take point on the interviews. So I've been talking with you, and now it's just over 50 other people, including you, since September. So a lot of talk about FPS games, which is just, for me, has meant a lot of, is this really my job sort of moments, because I would talk about this stuff all day anyway, somehow. So
it's really great. Just the people that you have in that video is just, everybody knows who they are. They've been making games for a long time,
Yeah, exactly. We actually polled our backers as the Kickstarter campaign was underway, asked them, which era do you all want us to focus on? And overwhelmingly, probably to no surprise to you, was 90s and early 2000s, because that's also my favorite period of the FPS genre, because you had this huge variety of mechanics, of themes, of settings, of weapons, of characters. There's just so much to explore there, more than we could possibly cover in 3+ hours that we're aiming for, but we're going to try our best.
Yeah, like I didn't see Outlaws in there, but I'm sure
we've talked about Outlaws, but it's like Robin Block, who's our executive producer, is like, now we can't really go too far above 4 minutes for this trailer. And me being a hardcore id fan, I'm like, well, I was going to devote the first 4 minutes to Doom, but I'll see what I can do.
Yeah. Yep. Lots of edits.
Yes.
Geez. Yeah. So it's I'm excited to just, I love that trailer is just, I want to watch this so much. And from the other creator VC movies that were made, which are my favorite genres ever, horror movies and sci-fi movies.
Awesome.
It's awesome to just to see that same format, but for FPS games. It's gonna be really great.
Yeah, and that's really what you can expect from FPS. It's funny, people ask me like, "What's FPS first-person shooter about?" I'm like, "Oh, it's about puzzle games, obviously."
Yeah.
But that's
Match
what we're
3.
gonna do. We're kind of gonna go like year by year, game by game. We won't be able to hit everything or tell every story because we're really, our only limitation for this is the amount of data a Blu-ray can hold. So we're gonna try to just pack as many stories in there as we can.
That's great. Well, I noticed that, say, In Search of Darkness has 3 different movies, and one of them's 4.5 hours. So
I know, and In Search of Tomorrow, I think it's like close to 5.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I did 5 hours of video just for me. So
you did. That was just for you. So the thing is, if I've talked to 50 people, you can start by multiplying that number by 2. And then add 3, because you got 3 more hours than everyone else. And that's because what we want to do is, obviously, I talked to everyone about the games they made, but I also wanted to get people's input on games that they've played. Because as you know, if you make games, you spend a lot of time playing them, not just because you love them, because you want to see what's out there. You want to see what your friends in the industry are doing. And so just you as an example, I was like, you and I have talked in the past for my books about Duke Nukem 3D, Half-Life, I mean, you name it. So I was like, John, tell me what you think of those games. Tell me what you remember from this moment, because that's the thing. We're going to get so much input that this is really, it's a by fans for fans project. And every FPS developer I've talked to, they started as a fan. And so it's really cool to see them really geek out over these games that they've never really had an opportunity to talk about, because they're just used to talking about their stuff,
Yeah. Yeah, I never started making FPS games as a fan because there weren't
No,
any.
you couldn't. You couldn't. You had to be a fan of the idea of let's go to first person, and that's something we're going to cover in the film too,
Yeah.
because like one of our unexplored games is Maze War, which kind of like games like Rogue. Not a lot of people could play that because you had to have access to a mainframe at a terminal connected to that mainframe, and the only people who had that access were you had to be in certain universities or laboratories, and so actually overwhelmingly, and this is reflected in a clip we just released. The majority of people I asked, "What was your first FPS?" They were like, "Oh, it was either Wolfenstein or it was Doom," because for a lot of people, like that was the genesis of this
How they got
of the genre. You know.
You know, it's funny. You mentioned Rogue and roguelikes. Roguelikes
Mhm.
are obviously kind of like a genre of games. Did you know that Rogue, which is like obviously the access was limited because it was on a mainframe and all that stuff. Did
Right.
you know that Rogue was not the first roguelike? The
No, it
first,
wasn't. Was it Beneath Apple Manor?
yeah, in 1978. They should be
Yep.
called Bama-likes.
So that's the
And
funny
that was on a
thing.
very accessible computer called the Apple II.
Yeah, a few people have that. I've heard. I certainly did, and you did. But that's the funny thing. 7 years ago now, I published a book called Dungeon Hacks, all about the origins of roguelikes. And chapter one was called the BAM like.
Yeah.
And that's where I talked about like if circumstances had been different and more people had had access to different computers, they would have found out about this game. And so it's kind of interesting. It's almost like convergent biology where you have people all over the world who have the same ideas, but they take different paths to get there. And that's
Yeah.
something that this film will highlight. Like, I mean, hell, one game that we talked a little bit about was MIDI Maze, which was another
Oh
early
yeah, Atari
FPS.
ST. Atari ST.
Yeah, exactly.
So one of the things that I thought was great because I didn't know much at all about Maze War, which was the very first person shooter. You know, was that on Play-Doh? The Play-Doh system?
It was on the IMLAC.
Oh, MLAC. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, I didn't know who the authors were, and then when I saw your the promo and it's Dave Lebeling, I'm like, no way, Dave
Yeah.
made Maze War. He's
Of
a
Zork
legend.
fame, right? Like,
Yeah, he's
it's wild.
Infocom. You know.
Yeah. So this was a cool story. This was a
I
really
was
cool
just
story.
amazed.
Yeah,
This is why
amazed.
this movie's gonna be so great. I did not know that. You know.
So I'm really glad to hear you say that. It brings a smile to my face. I don't know if you've heard about this. So Greg Thompson, one of the co-authors of Maze World, lived in San Francisco, and I coordinated their interviews. I was being kind of sneaky so that Greg would come right as I was finished talking to Tom Hall.
Okay.
And I actually got to watch Tom and Greg meet each other for the first time.
Wow.
And I was a fly on the wall, like Greg was saying, like, oh man, you guys had these awesome raster graphics, and I can't believe this tech you had access to. And it was really cool to see these two of these pioneers meet and interact. And it was just like, for me, that was my fan geek out moment, you know.
That's cool. Yeah, I had one of those as well when I got to at Indiecade one year, probably 2013 or so. I got to interview Steve Russell about Space War.
Oh man,
which is
that's
great.
Cool.
Yeah, right on stage with Steve and just going through all the stuff that he did, you know, and it's great to meet the pioneers, you know, like, you know, there's a lot of areas, let's say painting. There's a bunch of amazing paintings from people who have been dead for hundreds of years. But right now, you know, the Mozarts are still alive. People can meet them, you know, you can interview them, you can get the information down and you know, for posterity while they're still here. And that's like a pretty rare thing.
That's what's been important to me. It's one reason I was asked to get involved with this project. That's something I try to do with my books. I think there are a lot of authors out there, and you know, you can't blame them, but it can be hard to talk to pioneers. And so I feel like a lot of books and articles are kind of just Wikipedia articles with some spin thrown in, you know. But for me, I want to talk to the pioneers. I actually had that moment myself. This was back in 2008, I think, maybe 2009. It was close to when I was just starting to write, and I was meeting Dave Brevik at Gazillion to talk to him about Diablo for Stay a While and Listen, another of my books. And so here's what happened. Dave and I are coming out of Gazillion, and you come walking up. You were there with Chris Burke, and Chris was like, "Oh yeah, we're here to get a couch." And so like Dave and you and Chris were standing around, and I was just standing there like, like I've got John Romero and Dave Brevik, two of these guys who made like two of my favorite games ever. How is this even happening? I don't even think I could talk to you. I was just
at my company.
You know what I mean?
At my company.
Yeah, exactly.
And Chris Burke, I don't know. Did you know anything about Chris?
I ended up working with Chris like a year or so later. I worked on there was a revamp of Hellgate London. I completely re-released the game. I worked with Chris and
because Brevik wasn't Brevik? Yeah, he was working on that. That was his game.
That was Brevik's game. He was like, "We can talk about anything you want." And I'm like, "I might bring up Hellgate," and he's like, "Oh, let's start with Diablo."
Yeah,
like okay, you know, because every game developer has those tales of like sometimes your vision just can't, or rather the the funds you have, the time, the resources of game development don't always live up to your vision, which is so frustrating.
Yeah.
But yeah, like that moment for me was I was just starting out, and I was like, man, I hope I can talk to John Romero one day. And now I email you. Like I bet every week you're just waiting for an email like, "Hey John, it's me again. I've got more questions for you." That's kind of how it's going at this point. You know?
Got lots of answers.
I know
that's
you do,
cool,
man.
So Chris Burke, I don't know if you knew this, but Chris started programming games in the 70s.
Oh, that's cool.
And Chris is also a hardware engineer. He built boards that he sold for hard drive controllers for home computers for I think the Tandy Coco. So he and his brother had a hardware business back in the 70s, and he was basically making games from then. And I hired him. We kept running into each other in the Bay Area for years, and I finally hired him when I started Loot Drop in 2011.
Yeah.
And right now he's working at Madison Square Garden.
Man, that's so cool. He's such a fascinating guy. I've been trying to. I have a Mortal Kombat book coming out as well as a side book with extra interviews. And I want to talk to Chris about, they released, Jack Specific released like a plug and play Mortal Kombat. And I'm like, I know Chris had something to do. He obviously did the software, but I'm like, man, if he worked on the hardware, I could see that too. So there's a guy who's done so much like you. You've made over 100 games, worked on all these different platforms,
Yep. And still making games. And Chris is still making games too. So
yeah,
it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Geez, it's funny because you could probably pick anybody in that FPS documentary, and I have some comments about anything, and maybe it's something that people don't know. I don't know.
Well, so that's the thing. I'll fire off a name because you told me plenty of good stories about this guy. How about Warren Spector?
Well, of course, Warren, legendary Warren.
Yeah, but I mean, you're right. I also talked with Jeff Orkin and David Smith. David did Colony, and Jeff was an AI programmer on games like Fear.
Fear was so good. Oh my god!
It's so I've been replaying it. I was capturing a lot of the footage in that trailer. Is me. Like I did that the rocket jump where I jibbed that night, and I'm like, we got to include.
Oh, that was great.
That moment is badass. Yeah. Those are the sorts of homework assignments I've had. Like, David, we need a rocket jump. I'm like, oh, I'll get you.
I'll do it. Yeah, I wrote rocket jump. Come on.
Yeah, come on. That's the title of my book.
It's on Sugar Shack. Come on,
yeah. And that's actually something. So we'll explore this in the documentary too. But this is something I learned back when I was working on that book that I can't wait to share with more people in this film. That the first rocket jump was actually in Doom, right?
Yes, it was. Do you know what
it's
level?
Just not the rocket jump that you would think of. You can't like aim down at the floor, but it's the same thing, right? You're using a rocket to blast.
You're using a rocket to get to a secret area. Yep.
Yeah.
It's E3M6, and you had to basically get on a ledge and put yourself at the ledge and rocket jump your way down into a little area that had a switch that took you to the secret level, and that was Tom Hall's idea.
Yeah, that was a great idea, and it's actually my favorite secret level because when you get there, you're like, I've been here. Is something like going wrong? And then at the end, when you step on what should be the exit, the wall's lowered, you hear that cyber demon roar. It's just like one of many oh shit moments in that game,
So funny. Warren obviously was just amazing. And the way that I got in touch with Warren was at Iron Storm, we're working on all our games, and then one day a bunch of my artists are talking, and I'm just like, what's going on? And they're like, Warren Spector's team in Austin was basically dropped off a project. So, like, they're free. And I'm like, I wanted to bring Warren into Ion Storm. This is amazing. So
Yeah.
I contacted him and said, can I come down and sell you on Ion? And he's like, go ahead. So I drove down there, and he and his whole team, they weren't working on anything now, so they're all outside hanging out. And I basically just said, hey, everybody, we got a company. We're making a bunch of games. Warren, I want you to make a game for Ion Storm. It can be anything you want. It can take as long as you want, and I don't care how much it costs.
As a developer, how often do you get a pitch like that?
That never happens.
Play out,
It never happens. Yeah, and I also said, and also you get to run your office from down here, and we don't even bug you. You just do whatever you want. run your own studio for Ion Storm. And so he was just like, how can I refuse that? And then he made Deus Ex.
Yeah, that was and so that's a story I had known, obviously, but then I also like talking to people to fill in more color, more details. Like when I talked to Mike Wilson, one of my favorite stories that I've heard in 100+ hours of interviews was his rendition of the road trip with you to talk to Warren. And just listening to music and kind of air guitaring while you're on the steering wheel.
Yeah.
Just those stories that remind you that, like, behind this, all the code and the pixels, that there are people and just, creative geniuses working on these games.
People who have air guitared for decades, like me.
Of course.
And
who
then
are
still
perfected.
air guitaring is perfect. Yeah, absolutely.
Who sell out stadiums with their air guitaring. Yeah.
Totally. I could do Steve Vai all day on my car.
Yeah. And I have your quote too that we got, which is perfect. Like, if I'm listening to music, I'm air guitaring. I can't remember exactly what it was you said, but it's like, dude, hand in hand. Why would I not do that?
I know. So what other maybe I do have some stories that you don't have in your documentary.
So one question I asked everyone was, what's the most obscure FPS you ever played? And a lot of people said No One Lives Forever, which is still like the white whale for a lot of people to get re-released. I wonder what you could tell me just about that game, what you know about it.
Well, I sold it recently. In fact, I had a big box, unopened big box of No One Lives Forever that I put up on eBay. It was probably about 4 or 5 months ago, but I was like, here's big boxes that I'm not a collector of everything. I'm a collector of specific things. And so I had a lot of stuff. So I'm like, we're going to thin out some of the things that aren't part of like a specific kind of collection. Like one of the collections that I like actually have focused on are games from 83 and earlier. They're in Ziploc baggies. So I have a ton of Ziploc bag games.
Back when games were sold that way, right?
When they were sold in Ziploc bags and
instructions,
and cardboard with a disc and and the programmer's name right on the front, which is really great. So with Nulf, I don't know if I played it. I think I've seen it, but I didn't play it, which is why my big box was unopened. But I've known about it. I mean, it's like, how do you not know about that game? That was at year 2000? Is that when it came out?
Yeah, it was pretty close to that. And then, I did get to talk to Jeff Orkin, among a few other folks, about the sequel. And another really popular one that people wanted to know about was Prey 2006, the original release.
Yeah, that was the original Prey.
The one that actually came to stores, right? Because I was talking to Tom. He said, the design changed so much. But what do you know about that game?
The 2006 version?
Mm-hmm.
So,
or even before.
So Human Head, before they were Human Head, they were my team at Raven, and they made Heretic and they made Hexen, and they contacted me and they wanted to form their own company, but stay up there. So I told them, you know what, I could probably get you working on Daikatana 2, even though there's no way that we can even make that happen. So that's what I did. Basically got them their own office space, all of the hardware, got them using the Unreal Engine, and had them start learning the Unreal Engine and making Daikatana 2. And it was probably about 6 months. So the company started up, they're building stuff, And then IDOS is like, hey, what's this Daikatana 2? You guys aren't even finished with 1. And like, oh, well, we're doing some research on the new engine. It's like, well, we don't really, let's not spend that extra money on that right now. Let's just focus on the first one. So I'm like, okay, guys, the jig is up. So go find a deal. And so they did, and they basically made Rune. And when they were done making Rune, then they started making Tom, the new version of Tom's idea, because a lot of those original ideas were there, like in the game when they made Prey. So I've known Human Head for since starting it.
Yeah, that's so awesome. And I mean, the cool thing about when that game released, Prey came out in 2006, and it was basically the Portal game more than a year before Portal came out with Orange Fox, which was really cool. What did you think of the depiction of the Native American protagonist in that game? Because that's something I found kind of cool. You wouldn't see that protagonist as often in AAA games today, but back then FPS games could be anything. There were no limits on
creativity. Well, like Turok, right? Like Turok was
exactly,
like an earlier one from was it 96? I think Turok was 96. That was the first one, and then Tom came up with the idea of having a Native American as the main character that you play in the original Prey, and he had several names. I think Tommy Hawk and Talon Brave and stuff like that, and 90s names.
Right.
So I thought it was great. I thought it was just like one of those things where nowadays, inclusion and diversity is an important part of game design, and making a game where people feel like they belong in the game, or that they, like they see themselves in the game that they're playing. And absolutely underrepresented, culture being a Native American. And so I thought it was just great that they did it. They followed through, that when they did the redesign and everything, they kept that as a central part of the design. I thought it was great. Human Head guys are great.
Yeah, they sure are. I also really liked the experimentation they did with weapon archetypes. Like, you have a shotgun in that game, but it can like blast acid, and so it was just like this different take on a shotgun.
Yeah,
that's my favorite weapon in all of the FPS games. Gee, I wonder why. But it's always cool to see new spins on archetypes, right?
Did you see the Shot Cycler 6 in Daikatana?
Yeah, I love that game. I love that version.
Shotgun jump with that thing.
Yeah, that was what's really cool. I love how there were like kind of like tongue-in-cheek attempts to one up Doom, because Doom came out with the double-barreled shotgun, and then you have Blood. They're like, ours has 3 barrels, a 3-barreled shotgun. It's just cool.
Blood was so good. I love Blood.
Yeah, that's like that's one of the 90s games, of the build engine games especially, that still doesn't get enough love. Like, there's a lot of people who know it's good, but you hear primarily about Duke and Shadow Warrior.
Oh yeah, the big ones.
Yeah, exactly. But Blood, and I love Caleb, and that's such a great.
I think they had 4 build games going on at one time when that started. They had Shadow, they had Duke, they had Blood, and they had Ruins. Do you remember that?
I do remember that.
Do you know what it turned into?
No, what did it turn into?
Power Slave.
Oh wow! Yeah, that's like an origin story, and it's cool now that the build engine is back because of Ion Fury.
Yep.
Yeah. Man, that's
back.
Wild. Yeah, just how many games from today still trace back to those, kind of the founding fathers of the genre from back then.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I know that this is a different genre, but like the SimCity genre that goes back to Hammurabi, which is like the city building game, which goes back to the Sumerian game. And people don't know that the Sumerian game was an economic simulation on a mainframe that was designed in 1962 by a woman, and she led the design team. And it was the most complex one that has ever been made.
Yeah, that's still so cool. That's a bit of history I wasn't aware of, and that's why I love talking to you, because again, you make a lot of games where you're also just the student of the game, the student of history.
Oh yeah, and all the research on this hasn't been published yet. It's in a white paper, but it hasn't been put out yet. Devin Monins is the academic that has done all the research and interviews, but he's planning on getting that out. But I think it's an important part of history to get that out.
Absolutely. And I like that this goes back to what we were saying earlier about inclusivity and diversity. Even I think it was a few years ago, Megan Marie, who works at Crystal Dynamics, she put out this great book all about women in games, but there's still unwritten stories, untold
Oh,
stories.
unbelievable amounts. And Brenda, she does a really great talk about hidden histories, which is women the women who actually founded the computer industry. And
Yes.
everyone knows that ENIAC in 1946 was the first giant mainframe that could actually crunch numbers and was used, all built by women.
Mhm.
If you've ever heard of a compiler, that a woman built the first compiler, optimizing compiler. Woman
Mhm.
created assembly language, created pointers, you name it. Everything that
Yeah,
games depend on,
yeah, exactly. And that's actually something I'll have to share it with you. But recently I got to talk to Dr. Carly Kokorick, who she wrote this great book called Coin Operated Americans. And it was about not only a lot of the history of arcades, but how the history of video games has been kind of twisted so that it so that people now see it as this male dominated industry when, like you said, the foundation was paved by women before men were really getting involved with it.
Yeah,
And why are women kind of being harassed and shut out and pushed out? And it's really just fascinating reading. Like, they've always been there. We're the ones who are the relative newcomers.
exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
And also just game players. More women play games than men. When you look at
Oh yeah.
all the games that are out
Mhm.
there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was an interesting part of history that I want to delve more into about the women in games or girl games movement of the 90s, when there was this push to create more games tailored to women. And we saw a lot of like the Mary Kate and Ashley games, and those games were fine, nothing wrong with them. But the whole thing is women were playing games like Doom and Quake as well. I
Oh,
mean, I
totally.
talked to Amy Brady, Athena and Valkyrie, who's a pro
Yeah.
like Counter-Strike
PMS.
and Rainbow Six player. Yeah,
Yeah.
founded the PMS clan. And so we talked to her too, just we wanted to get as much perspective as we could in this film.
That's great. You got everybody.
Yeah, sure tried, man. Sure tried. I mean,
And
this
it's
is
funny because you're like trying to get as much information in there. You have way more information than you can fit in the movie. So that's why you put out another part 2 and a part 3 from all of those interviews, all
we
these little
have.
pieces.
Yeah, so we have some designs I can't go into, but we definitely talked about like how would we add to the story. One thing Robin told me early on was like, "Hey, make this movie with oh, that's awesome! I love the cup. I love the cup." So Chris, my co-director and our video editor, while he was out there, he said he got some merch, some
Oh,
Romero Games merch from you
yeah.
guys. So that's awesome. But one thing Robin, our executive producer, told me, he was like, "Hey, when the movie is done, you can write the book." So this is kind of like the spiritual sequel
Yes.
to Rocket Jump with even more input. I'm thinking of just doing it like screenplay format, so it can be all from
Oh, yeah.
directly from,
The
but
people. Yeah.
yeah, just directly from the people, straight from
That's
the horse's
interesting.
mouth.
Because it's
Yeah.
like, Steve Kent's ultimate guide to, ultimate history of video games that he wrote,
Yeah.
which is
Mhm.
mainly about Japanese video games. So you can
Right.
have the ultimate history of FPS.
Yeah, exactly. I should do a little like wordplay there, kind of make the title similar. And that book was originally, I think it was called like the first quarter or something
Yeah,
like
it
that
was
when he
originally called the first
self-published it.
quarter. I
Yeah,
wrote I
and then
wrote
when
the
it got
back.
picked up.
I wrote the
Oh,
back of the
that's
book.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Like, he talked about the kind of providence of that. So yeah, I mean, it's just so many cool stories, and I'm just looking for as many ways to share them as we can.
Yeah, well, I think it would be great to do that. Those books are like they become these references and resources that people will use when they're coming up with ideas for the next FPS. Because
Exactly.
one of the things that really helps is to know what went before. Like, am I
Hmm.
doing something really new? Because you might not be doing something new. Not that that's bad, but maybe there's someone did something, and those ideas from the past can be modified for today, or they had an idea that's different than what you were planning on doing, and maybe your idea is way better, and that's why it stopped. Back then.
Right. Right. Yeah. So it takes sometimes someone else to come along and offer this new perspective on it, which is what I loved about, and I know you were a fan as well, Doom 2016, how they
Yeah.
combined like the familiarity of Doom with some new mechanics that felt very much in the spirit of something you guys would have done from back in the
Totally.
day.
Yeah, it was perfect. It was perfect. It
Yeah.
was, the amount of, 4 reboots, and it was worth it. It was worth the 7 years that it took to build that into the revival of that franchise. So,
Yeah.
hats off. Bethesda really stuck with them, and really, lots of respect there.
Yeah, and you can tell they were fans, because some of my favorite moments in those games, in each level, there's a lever you can pull that opens the secret room somewhere. But when you step into it, you step into a pretty good recreation of a
The
room from
original.
Doom 1 or 2.
Yeah.
But with the Doom 2016 enemies, it's like this whole worlds colliding experience that for fans like me is just like, oh man, they did the thing. And it was just so cool to see.
It is, yeah. So many cool little Easter eggs in there.
Yeah.
Which is another thing, Easter eggs.
Yeah.
A whole nother subject,
Yeah, there's so much to talk about. And I specifically have some questions about Wolfenstein for you, because one thing that the team and I did recently, we put out a story segment on Wolfenstein 3D that was meant, it's a teaser. And the thing about these teasers, it's kind of like when an actor goes on a late night show and like, here's a clip from the film that's like 49 minutes in, but you can't provide all the context. But it deals with two things. It deals with the transition of Wolfenstein 3D from very much in line with the stealth games from Apple II to fast-paced first-person shooter that kind of popularized the formula we still use today. And then Wolfenstein 3D on SNES. And, we hope to explore that full story in the film. But since I have you here, what can you tell me from your perspective about that particular port?
Well, the interesting thing about that port was, we weren't licensed Nintendo developers. and so, during that time, there was a device called the Sluggo, which was this third-party thing that you could actually burn SNES ROMs on and run them. And, it emulated a SNES and everything. It was the hardware. So that was the dev system. We didn't actually have a Super Nintendo development system. I actually got my hands on one. I do have a Super Nintendo development system from Nintendo from, 92, 93. And it was Nasser Jabeli's Super Nintendo development system that he used for Secret of Mana.
That's awesome. You should just open a museum and give it over to John, because you've got the stuff for it.
So we had this Sluggo, and so now we have a way of making a Super Nintendo game. We earlier, in late summer of '92, after we released Wolfenstein, and we were probably getting close to finishing Spear of Destiny, Imagineer called us and said, we want a Super Nintendo version of Wolfenstein. So we're like, let's do this. So we contacted Rebecca Heineman, basically said, hey, interested in doing some port. And we actually had just finished hanging out with Heineman in, it was July, early July. We had gone to Kansas Fest to show everybody who was an Apple II programmer and, game enthusiast there, that we had made this new version. And we had the very first Toshiba color laptop in the world. So there wasn't a color laptop around until May of 1992.
Oh, that's awesome.
And it cost $5,000, of course. And, and it was great. It was a great machine. It ran Wolfenstein really, really well. And Wolfenstein was finished, and so we could show everybody. And guess what? So every year at Kansas Fest, they have a classic, like God-level Apple II programmer to do the keynote and speak and all that stuff. And that year was Silas Warner, the guy who made Castle Wolfenstein.
Oh, that's
like
awesome.
The amazing luck
line up like that
of all time, right?
Yeah.
And it was great because we got to sit, all of us are sitting in the room hearing him talk about the history of Muse software, how he wrote Supertext and Castle Wolfenstein and Firebug and like The Voice and you name it, all the cool stuff that he wrote. And we got to talk to him later, right afterwards, just like, oh my God, this is, what's really cool. The audio from that is online. You can actually listen to the audio of him talking in 1992 when we were there. And there's some photos from the room that are actually out there. So people were taking pictures too. Yeah. So later that night, we were this conference was held at a college, and the college is shut down during the summer, so they can just like let people do whatever when they like make plans. So the plan for this whole festival was at this college. So there's dorms everywhere. Everyone just sleeps in one of their dorm rooms, and everyone just hangs out in the halls 24/7, no going to sleep. Like it was all programmers, just like people talking programming 6502 and games and everything. And
Yeah.
and Silas was there, and Silas basically joined us in the hallway, and we were just talking about Muse and Wolfenstein and just for hours. It was so cool. And Rebecca Heinemann was there as well. And so we all hit it off because Rebecca's a expert level assembly language programmer as well. So
Right.
that was why we had her in mind when we started on the port. And so finally, we totally forgot about the port. And then Imagineer, we're making Doom. It's 1993. We're already like 4 months into it. And Imagineer calls us and is like, "Hey, where's Wolfenstein Super Nintendo?" And we're like, "Oh my God, I totally forgot." And so we got in touch with Rebecca and found out that Rebecca had gotten too busy as well and hadn't really worked on it. So we have to get this done ASAP because they Imagineer is a really great company. They gave us a really big advance to start this project, and we wanted to deliver. So we stopped Doom. Everyone in the company stops immediately making Doom. And we're like, okay, we have to learn the hardware. We got to we know 65.816 assembly language, but we need to optimize. We need to learn the Super Nintendo. Luckily, Rebecca had given us some initialization code to get the machine state straightened out, and had written the sound driver so we can get audio out there. Because sound drivers at that time, they're always one of the hardest, flakiest, weird things to get straight. Because it's such low-level hardware interaction compared to just about everything else other than graphics. So we got that, and then everyone in the company just focused like Eye of Sauron on Wolfenstein. We finished it in 3 weeks. And
3 weeks.
3 weeks. We needed to get back on Doom. So we turboed that thing out in 3 weeks. That's including, the dogs turn into rats. We don't have blood, all these things that we had to do to just get it through Nintendo sensors. And that's stuff that Imagineer basically told us because, they want it out, and they were on high speed feedback for us. So they told us all the things that we had to obey, so we didn't have to do this back and forth garbage. So we just powered it, and then we got back to Doom immediately after turning in the ROM.
Man, that's wild! Like three weeks for that. I really appreciate you telling that because, like I said, with these trailers, it's so hard to get the full stories in there. So I'm glad for the additional context. And the other thing, I played the Super Nintendo version. This was when did it come out? Like 94, I think. So it would have been a couple years after the PC version. And
a year after we made it.
Yeah, a year after we made it.
We turned it in, and it wasn't for a year that it got published.
Yeah. But the one thing I loved about that, so a couple questions from that. First, the cool thing I think about Wolfenstein, part of what makes it strategic, the one on the PC, is that the guns you get are almost like upgrades of the pistol. It's just a better handgun, but they all use the same ammo. So that's kind of the cool thing. Like part of the strategy is you can't just go in every room with the chain gun because you'll burn through ammo too fast on the weaker dudes.
Yeah.
But the Super Nintendo version has a rocket launcher, a flamethrower. Did you want to include those weapons in the original release?
Actually, no, we didn't. We didn't because this was the first time we put weapons in the game. Right, it was the Wolfenstein 3D was brand new, but because before that you're throwing little fireballs in Craddock 3D, and you're a tank shooting a fireball basically. So it was the first time we put weapons in, and we didn't think about other ammo types or really expanding the vocabulary of the thing that we're using as the primary object of destruction. It was just one ammo type, and we're just going to go from a pistol to a machine gun to a chain gun, and it was well, that's helpful because it uses the same ammo, but it was a bad design because you basically get the next gun and you kind of wipe out the previous gun. No one needs a pistol after you get the machine gun. Now the machine gun and the chain gun, you could go between those two because of just the velocity of how much bullets fly out of that chain gun. But you know what? Other than that, it's just like really not great. It's not a great balance. But even if you just are sitting there, it becomes a game of just ammo, conservance. You're like you can't burn through it, and now you have to get kind of strategic with who you're shooting, and maybe going to back out to not take hits, and because when you start running out of health and your ammo's starting to get low, now you're really playing.
Yeah,
Because if you
that's
run through.
exactly it.
If you're burning through all your ammo, you're like, "Woo, this game is awesome! I'm just destroying." It's like I have nothing. Oh my god, So, and the funny thing about the development of Wolfenstein that a lot of people don't know is that like when you think about things like, oh, we only had this one ammo type and we only had these 3 guns and a knife. There were only 4 of us making Wolfenstein, and we only spent 4 months making it.
Right, which is still wild.
We made it in 4, and in the middle of all that, we moved from Wisconsin to Mesquite, Texas, and we also took a trip to Sierra Online in California to basically they offered to buy our company for $2.5 million.
Mm-hmm.
All that stuff happened right in the middle of like making this 4-month game. That was the start of the FPS.
That's awesome. And the other thing I noticed about the Super Nintendo version was how there was like this mix of like new levels, but also heavily modified versions of levels from the PC game. So it was almost like if you were like me and you'd played the PC game, you're almost playing like Wolfenstein Remix or something.
Yeah, it is.
So I wondered why the levels were remixed. Was it just hardware or
memory?
Memory. Okay.
Because those levels. Yeah, because there's definite memory. And the other thing you had mentioned about the rockets and all the other stuff we threw in there was because like we're making Doom, and it is cooler to have a rocket launcher in there. Not just the pistol, because we really, when we started expanding the different kinds of weapons and all that we had in Doom, it really felt good. And so while we're doing the SNES port, we care about our games. It doesn't matter what, if we're working on that port, we're putting everything into it. Even though we're trying to hurry up, we're doing everything we can to improve it, make it the best thing that we can put out there. And so we're just like, you know what? Let's put the rocket launcher in there. It would be really cool to have a rocket launcher, like a super gun, because it's really cool in Doom, even though we're like really early in making Doom. We just knew that would be a cool improvement, and it would be a reason to buy it. If you had the PC version, you hear the SNES version has a rocket launcher in it. Let me get that one. I want to get that one too.
Yeah. So was the Mac version of Wolfenstein, was that kind of derived from that SNES port?
It's from the PC version.
From the PC version.
Yeah.
Okay, but it has like the flamethrower and stuff, so it was kind of like
it's like a mix. Yeah, which is totally fine. Like do cooler stuff. It's like Doom 64. Like how different, right?
Yes.
So it's like it's that kind of creative freedom to like improve the game in some way with stuff that we would just go, yeah, dude, flamethrower, why not? Burn down Nazis, do it.
Yeah. That's cool. So I think maybe the analog, correct me if I'm wrong, but the analog in Doom is like the plasma gun. Did you want to do a flamethrower in Doom? I mean, how did you arrive at the plasma gun after doing the flamethrower in Wolfenstein SNES?
Well, because we only had so many weapon slots, and we wanted the highest number of slots to be sci-fi. So we wanted like the cooler, like conventional stuff, working our way up to whoa, crazy stuff. Like weapon number 6, what is it? Oh my God, what is this gun? Versus number 5, it's a rocket launcher. Okay, I got it. So it was like put the cool sci-fi stuff at the very end, and so that's basically why we did that.
I still think Doom has like the best weapon balance of FPS I've ever played, to the point where this is something that like I kind of subconsciously realized, but then I got people to actually say it in interviews. When I talked to, I think the two who brought this up were Scott Miller and Randy Pitchford. When we were talking about Duke 3D, they were like, yeah, Doom had pistol, shotgun, chain gun, rocket launcher on 2, 3, 4, 5. So we did the exact same thing because we didn't want anyone having to like think about new placements. And then after that, it was our new stuff, like the pipe bomb and the freeze ray and stuff. But like going from Doom to Duke, I was like, I didn't even think about the fact that I was hitting 3 for the shotgun. It's just that in my mind, 3 equals shotgun.
Yeah. What's funny is that that philosophy there, that is something that is still really prevalent in design, is the pattern of like your input pattern that people are used to playing a shooter using, WASD and arrows and the number keys and all of those things. People keeping those same inputs, consistent makes it easy for people just to jump into another game and play it. And it's really important that people keep that consistency. And you might not know it, but Facebook games have drastically different design patterns to them. And
Makes sense.
a lot of Facebook games have very similar mechanics and very similar UI, like placement of things in the UI, where your friends are, where your energy is. All those things are for a reason. It's because at the time Facebook players had pretty low game literacy. They were playing games for the first time, a lot of them, and so keeping those patterns the same between games meant that someone who liked these new games could play a lot of them during lunch because they didn't have to relearn a game when they hopped to another one.
That makes complete sense. I don't remember if Mafia or Farmville came first, but I remember each of those, they kind of set the molds I even did some writing for Facebook games that were very much in the design vein of Mafia, but different, stories and settings
Totally.
and stuff. But that makes complete sense. I never knew that. That's really fascinating.
Yeah. So keeping they call it, don't overthrow the receiver. If you are trying to do something too complex for the player, they will reject your game because they don't have the time. They're playing this at lunch, So think about the slot that you have to get into, and how can you bring something new to a mechanically similar game, in a specific genre, like the decorating genre, that kind of thing. And how can your game slot in to that lunchtime, but bring something newer to that type of game and make people want to pay more attention to yours than the other one? Because if a new one comes in, do they just first in, first out, or like how do they sort their games? Can you come up with something that is more interesting than what's out there, but not too different?
Yeah, that makes sense, because I think Duke 3D is the perfect example about that. I mean, that game came out in, I think it was January 29th, 96. So roughly 5 months before Quake. And so Doom was still kind of the reigning king of the FPS. And so it made sense when I learned that, mechanically we were chasing Doom. But those guys I talked to also said we wanted to do something different stylistically to set ourselves apart from Doom, because they had nailed that as well as anyone could nail it. So that's why we made, Duke have more humor and do things like being able to blow up walls. And I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like, it's kind of an iteration on the Doom formula. It's Doom with a different sort of sense of character in place.
Yeah. Duke is one of my favorite games of all time. It was
good.
Of all the features that you could put into a game for multiplayer and everything, it had all of those features. And one of the interesting things about Duke that is a mirror of Wolfenstein is that, and this is because this is a Scott Miller production, right? Scott Miller, when we got done with the shareware version of Wolfenstein, he wanted it out, right? He wanted that thing out there because he knew it was just going to be a rocket. But we weren't done making all of the trilogy. We had just done the shareware version, and he wanted it up there and to start getting orders. And so we're like, okay, I guess we'll really hurry up and get those other 2 episodes done with the boss fights and all the levels and all that stuff. And then he comes up with the idea of having 3 more episodes in the way that he, in your documentary has like the $35, the $15 for the extra 3, like double the gameplay for less than half the extra money. And then $10 on top, a little cherry on top, is that hint book that everybody got. And so he presented the idea, and this is immediately after we upload the thing. And now we need to go as fast as we can to put 50 levels and a hint book together to fulfill all of the orders that were 99.9% all 6 episodes with the hint book. And so this was the get it out and follow as fast as you can to get it done. They did the same thing with Duke. They had spent years making the shareware version of Duke that they uploaded on January 29th. They didn't have any other episodes.
Oh, man.
They had to make them as fast as they could. And the great thing about it is, those episodes are really good. Episode 2 and 3 are so different, and they did not feel like they were rushed, which is incredible when you think about the fact that the shareware was out there and on fire. They needed to beat Quake because it was coming, right? They needed to get this game out, and getting it out in January was as fast as possible was super smart. That Scott and George made a great decision there, but the creative team that George was also in charge of, did not rush it and make it a bad quality game. He it was excellent. I love the music. Like Lee Jackson and Robert Prince did an amazing job. Sometimes you can't tell who did what, like which song, and I have so many favorite songs. I played Duke's soundtrack every day for years at work.
It's a great soundtrack.
It is really Plasma, the Plasma Pack, like that came in after that. All of those songs, you name it. I know the names of all the songs. It's insane. Love that game so much.
Yeah, I was really excited. I got the 20th anniversary world tour from, I guess that was 2016 now. It's hard to believe that was like 6 years ago.
I know.
But and they brought back like Level Lord. I got to talk to him about Duke 3D. And it was just like, man, that's kind of how you do a re-release right. Get the people involved with it and have them bring like a lot of their modern sensibilities to this thing they worked on 10, 20 years ago, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Which is what you did with Sigil, right? Like
I was just going to say that.
Yeah, Sigil. Oh man, I love that too. And it's kind of cool now because like I love Sigil. I was like, this to me is Doom's unofficial official 5th episode, but then when Bethesda curated it as part of the mods, I'm like, to me that's just, it's part of the game now. Like there is a Doom episode 5 part and parcel with the package.
They licensed it for $666.
Yeah, which is great, which is perfect.
It is,
which is perfect. Yeah, but those stories about Wolfenstein you were telling, it sounds like one of the themes of Wolfenstein was hurry up, but make it good as you can.
Yeah, it was. The thing about Wolfenstein was that it was the first game. Now, it's hilarious because, we got it out in 4 months. 4 months was double the amount of time we made any game back then. So in 1991, we before founding it in February 1st of 91, we had been making games for, since August of 1990. And in August of 1990, John and I made a game each that 1 month. So we made 2 games in 1 month in August of 1990. Then we started making a game every 2 months. So we had to ship every 2 months. While we're shipping a game every 2 months, we're also making a trilogy of games to put out as shareware, which was the first Commander Keen. So we're making like 5 games during that 3 months. And and then 1991, we made 10 games. So, and they were overlapped and off by a month, and 10 games. So we were really good at getting stuff done really fast, like designing in minutes a whole game, and now it's just execution of that within 2 months. And that is also at the same time during those 2 months is like getting into 3D programming and making a 3D game within 2 months. And then that first texture mapped 3D, FPS in 2 months with Catacomb 3D. And so by the time Wolfenstein came around, we're just going to improve the engine. We're not going to throw it away. We're going to actually just improve it and make it better, and because the company was doing so well at that time and we're ready to we were done with our soft disk, the chains were off from the whole soft disk, year of penance for what we did by making Commander Keen. It was a horrible idea, and becoming independent and everything. And so we paid that back. And then it's like, okay, we can now do a game. The money is good right now. We don't have a time limit. Let's make a really great game. We're still making stuff fast, so it's like 4 months. 4 months was like, this is amazing. 4 whole months. Like the engine was working within a week, in that context, 4 months must have felt like it was. Time, It was crazy. What's so funny about it was, I think right past the 4 months when we spent another month and a half doing 50 levels in the hint book, it was a month and a half extra. So, we were good at making levels. We could make 2 levels a day at least. So we were we were really fast. And
one story you told me about the hint book, and I empathize with you as a writer. You're like, how many ways can we come up with shoot the Nazis, and
lay them down?
Yeah.
If anybody wants to get, Google the Wolfenstein Hint Manual PDF that's out there, you can read all the ways that Tom and I had to come up with, like mowing them down, laying them down, like the carpets, like doing all kinds of stuff to them.
Yeah.
Just all we're like delirious, I think, when we're making this hint book. It's so funny and crazy. But yeah, it was just, we were so, even during that month and a half when we had to do 50 levels, for us, coming from Commander Keen's rich, like, graphics and design and all of the different key doors and hidden areas and all of that cool stuff, like what you see is what you get, going to an abstract representation of a level, was like, playing the game's great. Making it was boring. Those levels, like making levels for Wolfenstein, was some of the hardest work because it was just mind numbing, because it was so simple, and it was, for us, it was like, how do we get crafty with these sound zones, which I don't know if you covered the sound zones that we had in the game.
That's actually a point that it's not in the teaser video, but it is in the full film, because that's one of the things. So Wolfenstein to me was very important, not only because it was my first FPS, and then I ended up going back. I think I played Catacomb and Hovertank on like a demo disc years later, but it was the first game I'd ever played with a Sound Blaster card, and it was like a night and day difference. And so I asked you, I asked Carmack, I asked Tom, everybody, like, how important was audio to Wolf 3D?
Yeah.
And those sound zones, that's something I didn't pick up on. Like I didn't know about as a player. I just kind of knew, like, man, it's like this guy, it's like, it's not like all the doors open and they're rushing at me at once.
Yeah.
You have to be very selective about who you wake up, which is part of the strategy of the game.
Exactly. And we could, as designers, be super sneaky. And, in a room, you have a sound zone color for that room.
Mm-hmm.
And out in the hallway, there's another color. Like, every single area has a different color. So we had 34 sound zones that we could use. 34 different rooms, and so you would keep, like, if there's a long winding hallway, it's one sound zone. So anything that's there, it's going to get alerted and they will start coming towards you. But if you wanted to, we could take a color of a sound zone in one room and put it in a closet way far away. And when you activate that room, you're activating that one other room where somebody is, like, now heard you, even though you're all the way across the level. And so that became one of the only fun parts of making the levels, where, I'm going to screw the players so bad, and I'm thinking, I'm going to kill Tom by doing this, because we're always playing each other's stuff. And and then the push wall stuff. One of the things that this is funny. So you remember, the story about how push walls was just like this issue. Like, John, we needed a way of adding secrets in the game to make the experience more rich for the player.
And you and Tom were pushing for it, right? Like,
we're pushing to have a secret wall. And because the walls, like, when we started making the game, the walls were made out of rock, like in some like moss coming off of it. And so for us, it was like, yeah, what if you, like, pushed a wall and it pushed back in? And so to actually get to a secret area, you actually had to push it back 2 slots, because pushing it back 1 slot means you're just in an indentation, an opening, but you have to push it again to have a passage away from it, right? So we knew that kind of a design meant that, like, secret areas had to have a little bit more space, but we, like, to have secret areas would be so fun, and we had no secret areas for, like, the first half of development. And we kept on talking to John about, like, please, like, we need to have push walls. John didn't want to violate the sanctity of his code. It would be a hack for him to add that in. So he did it, because we're just like, please, design-wise, this thing's boring. Like, we want stuff to find in this game, And so he did it. He hacked it in. It looks great. Sounds great. You don't know that it's a hack. It just feels like it's part of the game.
It does. Well, and I love the audio of the walls sliding back.
It sounds like a heavy stone block sliding across the ground.
It just gets you pumped. It's like some scene from a movie, like out of Jumanji or something. Like, we're going into uncharted territory. That brings to mind another question I meant to ask you. One thing I thought was particularly ballsy is, in Doom, the entrances to the secret level in each episode are usually, like, at least 3 levels in. Like, E1M3 can take you to E1M9. Exactly, but in Wolfenstein 3D Episode 1, you can get to the secret level from the first level. What made you put the instance of the secret level in that map?
That was just Tom's idea. You know,
Oh, okay.
Tom made
Yeah.
the first episode, and
Okay.
you know, I think it was like people will not suspect this.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
certainly didn't the first time I found it.
the secret elevator. What?
Yeah.
But the thing I was talking about push walls is really funny. Um, I came up with this is just like a few months ago. I came up with like, oh my God, we could have done push walls this way and it wouldn't have violated anything.
Mhm.
So this is unbelievably this happened probably about a month ago. Did a Zoom call with a university,
Mhm.
and this Zoom call was just to talk to a game design class. Me, John Carmack, Tom Hall, Kevin Cloud, all talking to a class.
That is awesome. What a treat for them too.
So I
Damn.
told him about the push wall.
Mhm.
I told him about the push wall, and I told him how he's like, I can't believe I didn't come up with this idea back then, but we could have just used, you know, how you open a door,
Yeah.
right? Why couldn't we just open a secret door?
Oh, have a wall open?
Yeah, sliding
Like,
sideways.
because that's how they work in Doom, right? Like the secret walls will
Yeah,
go
they
up,
just go up,
like
just like
doors
the
do.
normal
Yeah.
doors.
Right.
So I said that, and he's like, "Oh my God."
But that just goes to show you, like, even though 4 months was technically a long time relative to what you had, you were all working on so many things. You can't think of everything all at once.
I know.
You know?
Well, 4 months. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So one philosophy you've talked about, and we've always talked about this in the context of Doom, is always make the first level last, so that you've learned everything you've learned you can pour into this first level. What did Tom make Wolfenstein with that same philosophy, or at what point was E1M1 of Wolfenstein made?
That was the first level.
That was first level.
Yeah,
Okay.
map
Okay.
one was the first. Yeah, E1M1 was the first one.
Because it still really holds up. It's a really damn good level.
Yeah, you know, it is. You know, and the thing is, a lot of times those levels are revisited. It's not like he just finished it. It's like
Right.
he does. You know, like it was before I came up with that rule. It was kind of like we understood that we should go back over our old stuff, because by the end we have done some some cooler things. We had some cool ideas. Maybe there's some code that was added that made
Right.
all the levels cooler, but we would like go back and we would modify and improve earlier stuff so the quality matched. And so that was just like a thing that we understood. But then when it came time for Doom, I was just like, here's a really good rule.
Yeah. Okay.
You know,
okay.
the first level is last, and so like, and also like the second level needs to be like close, or heavily edited for the whole time that you're making a game. Like it's important that it's not done and forgotten. It has to be refreshed, and so it's easier when you get into today's production schedules. You don't have time really to go do that. So if you can just sequence your levels to have that first experience be one of the last things that you make, you are throwing everything at the player. And that just makes something really cool. I was just told that we are now going to do Q&A.
Oh, okay.
We have time for Q&A.
Well, I actually saw a comment from Juggernaut X. I wish I was in that class. Me too. That would be a great class. I would just sit there, kind of like in that parking lot with you and Dave Brevik talking. Like,
it was the first time. It was the first time that we all have gotten together since '93.
Wow, that's so cool. And that was kind of how people did reunions in the Zoom era.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's see. I'm going to have to figure out who's going to choose these Q&As. Yeah, let me say. Oh, let's see. Let me see.
Well, here's another comment that jumps out. I wonder if you can do this. Metalhead Maniac says, I played E1M1 so much that I was able to play it with my eyes closed. I think I might be addicted to that level. I wonder if do you think you could pull that off, John? Doom E1M1 with your eyes closed?
Maybe. You know what's funny? What as your shirt advertises, Pac-Man was one of my favorite games of all time. My most important
I wore
game.
this for John, by the way. You can't see it, but thanks for the chance to plug the shirt. Yeah.
Yes. The most important game to my entire career was Pac-Man. As far as an influence, and I played it so much that I could beat the first 2 levels of Pac-Man not even looking at the screen.
Wow.
So that's kind of like
That's
that E1M1
amazing.
thing. Yeah. I created my own patterns. I didn't even use books, And by the way,
Yeah.
Scott Miller actually wrote pattern books back in the 80s for arcade games.
That's right. He and George Broussard co-authored a
Yeah.
lot of that stuff, right?
Shootout.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's called Shootout, I think.
Yeah.
All right, what's another okay. What's a good one? Imagine to
here's
have
a good one. Jagdog 2525. If present day John could give advice to 92, 93 John, what would it be? That's a good question.
92 John, I would say you could make a push wall by just making a door that avoid any problems. Yeah.
John Carmack would want to know that too.
I know.
Yeah.
Geez. What other things would I say? So much was done right, at that time, so much was done right, and with the speed that we were doing it, I don't know if we could have done more. I wouldn't say add a rocket launcher to Wolfenstein, because that was just more time and more bounce and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And we're just I wouldn't change it.
Well, but it's like you said, like we were talking earlier, you can't think of everything at the same time, but that's actually, like, again, as a fan, I enjoyed Wolf 3D on SNES because it was a remixed version of a game I had already played on other platforms, so it was just as worth playing on the SNES.
It's like Doom 64 or say PlayStation Doom, right? Like that was such a great job. Amazing. Yeah, Midway really, they knocked it out of the park. Both of those versions. Let's see. Someone's wanting to know if I would make after I do Sigil 2, if I would do a Doom 3. I wouldn't do that because I didn't make Doom 3, but I would do a Quake episode,
Yeah. Yeah. I've always, just to kind of piggyback off that, because that's a great question. I know that, like, for you, we've talked about how Quake, for you, you're very proud of it, but it was one of the hardest games you ever made because of the crunch. That was like the first time you all felt like you were crunching rather than just having fun making a game.
Yeah.
Do you feel that going back to Quake level design would be as fun for you as
absolutely.
Back to Doom level design?
It would. Okay. It would be really fun, because it would be the thing that even though Quake was really hard to make, when you are creating something, when you're in that creative space, everything else disappears.
Yeah, it's magic.
So making levels and being in there and making those levels, it almost doesn't matter what else is going on around me. That's my focus and what I'm pouring everything into, and it's just super fun. So if it was a super horrible time, I would have left because, like, oh, this is just terrible. But like when I'm making stuff, I'm really focused. And somebody had just asked a good question. Did you have any involvement with Super Nintendo version of Doom?
Yeah, that's another really interesting version. So I believe you did, because you and I talked about that a couple years ago. I'd love to hear the story.
Okay, so Doom was going to get ported, right? Like we have to get this game out on everything. Right. And so Sega was going to port Doom. Like Sega themselves were going to make it for the 32X, which was still being created in hardware. Sega actually came to our office and brought the motherboard that was the 32X, and basically had John Carmack help optimize the rendering to use the new hardware, but just like to get the frame rate as high as they could, they had to come over and have us help them do the assembly language stuff for it. So, so we got involved with all these ports, like Jaguar Doom, we did ourselves. Like no one else did Jaguar Doom. And so all of these different ports, like we didn't do 3DO or Saturn or anything like that, but like we were involved in those two. The funny thing about the Super Nintendo port of Doom is that it arrived in the mail.
Oh yeah, wasn't that like someone had sculptured software to like get your attention?
Exactly.
This is a habit with you too. Like Scott Miller got your attention by mailing you letters, and Sculpture got your attention by sending you a Doom prototype in the mail.
They sent us the game. It was done.
Oh, it was just done?
It was finished. Yeah, it was done. Doom was it played at the same rate. It didn't get sped up. It was done. And Sculptured software was, I actually went and visited Sculptured. I I'd say, later that year,
Mhm.
I played, like, during the development of Doom, I played the hell out of Super Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back and Super Return of the Jedi.
Great games.
Sculptured was the best, right? Like they
Yeah.
were incredible. So they sent it to us. We're like, I guess we're publishing this. Like, we didn't have to pay somebody to do it. Like, they just did it.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. It was like the only time that's ever happened where someone just says, "Here, please publish this." And we're like, we're putting this on a red cartridge. This thing is amazing.
That was so cool. That's another version that, like, I played after the fact. I remember I was at a KB Toys where I bought most of my console games back then.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking, like, where did I buy my computer games? I know that for Doom, I had my mom call the number and order the full version. But for the Super Nintendo version, I found it in a bargain bin. I got it for like $20. And I was like, a red cartridge? Because I think by that time I'd seen the black for Killer Instinct. And so that was pretty cool. Like the novelty of colored cartridges.
The color
cartridge. 8 and 16-bit days. Yeah.
When I went to visit Sculptured Software, I just found out where their office was, and I just went there. I didn't tell anybody anything. I just went to their office, go to the secretary at front. I said, I'm wondering if I can get just like a tour of the office. You guys made like the Super Nintendo version of Doom, and that's a game I made, and you guys did an amazing job. I'd like to just like say hi to some of the people that were here. At that time, the Mortal Kombat team from Midway was in the building.
Oh my gosh! Yeah, that's
because they were going to do the Mortal Kombat SNES,
right?
And so they basically first they tried to hire me, and I was just like, no, I'm just here just to visit, and just to talk to some people.
I have my own company. I don't know if you've heard.
You may not have heard of it. So somebody walked me around and told me just a little bit. And I was like, say hi at this Mortal Kombat team. I'm like, love it,
Yeah.
And we go down the hall, and they had done pair programming where there's two coders in a room, and so they had the names of the programmers' room, names on the door, and I'm just they're walking me through. I'm like, oh my God, Peter Ward, is that really Peter Ward? And I knock on the door, and there's a person in the room. I'm like, are you Peter Ward? And the guy's like, no. Oh my God. No, Peter's sick today. I'm like, no way. Like, I love Black Magic and South Pacific Quest on the Apple II. And he's just like, he's not going to believe this. I can't believe he was sick today. I'm just like, tell Peter I said hi. He's one of my favorite game programmers on the Apple II from like 1982. This is like 14 years later, but he was working there at Sculpture.
That's amazing. The industry, for as big as it is then and now, like it can sometimes feel like a small place, right? Like just bumping into people. Tyler, Tyler 23 asked David, have you finally interviewed Adrian Carmack for the doc? And yes, just last week when Adrian got back to Dallas, we've been talking for months over email. He's just been keeping me up to date on his itinerary, and we finally did get to sit down. One of the questions I asked him was, so Adrian, I know that by the time you guys were moving on to Wolfenstein, kind of like you, he was sick of working on Keen. He wanted a change of pace. But I said, so who was the guy who hung all the Keen dolls in the secret level of Doom 2? He's like, oh yeah, I was that asshole.
Yeah.
Which was hilarious. Yeah.
Yep, he's the one who did it.
Yeah.
So that was great. That was a really good question. Someone else out here, were arcade games a big influence? They were a big influence because the arcade is where I grew up, basically. Like, which is like a whole other set of documentaries. Like, I lived there. Like, I can't even relay how amazing arcades were. It's got to be as cool as people playing, shooters for the first time that have never seen anything like that.
Yeah, the way so I just finished this book on the arcade era of Mortal Kombat that'll be out this fall. And what a lot of people, the analogy I came up with, it was like back in the day, before games like Doom and Wolfenstein, the arcade, it was like the arcade master race. Because if you wanted to play the best version of a game like Mortal Kombat, like, yes, you could play it at home.
You go to the arcade.
Hardware was the best of the best.
Oh, yeah. It was incredible. The amount of games back then, insane. So how big of an influence was the original Wing Commander? It was no influence whatsoever. Um, it was a great game. In fact, it was funny. It came out, I think, in 1990. In 1991, that was when like Jay Wilbur was addicted to Wing Commander. So when we were there at ID and we're making stuff as fast as we can, Jay gets home from working at Soft Disk, and the first thing he's got a whole like Wing Commander joystick that's suctioned to his desk. He lives on this thing, and so he's playing Wing Commander every day for months. Great game, like Chris Roberts did an amazing job with that, but we didn't see that as an influence. I think because doing space in 3D was not something that got us excited. That's been around 10 years before Wing Commander, or in 3D. Like I played Apple II games or in space in 3D. That was done. To me,
like
it was
Sundog
a new thing.
And
or Epic or Hadron, like those games, games that even Nasser Jabeli had written, like Zenith and Horizon 5, stuff like that. They were done. I saw them. They were cool back then, and just like VGA version of it is not getting me excited, but it was the dogfighting was the best. Like that was the best dogfighting I'd ever seen in a game. So that was cool. I know why Jay was hooked. We thought it was. I wish we had time to play, but nope, we're making games as fast as we can. So,
that's true. So one thing people know, they probably know, is that like obviously Super Mario Brothers influenced Keen, but one thing you told me for Rocket Jump was that Mario influenced your FPS games as well, because you wanted things like jumping and just the active movement to feel as smooth as it did in Mario games, right?
Yep, yeah. We wanted the the full 3D experience to feel Nintendo quality. Like we wanted and when you analyze, Super Mario Brothers 3, 1, whatever, like the friction, the velocity, the jumping, the gravity, you name it, the sound effects, like everything is so tuned perfectly, and that's with direct to hardware tuning. Like just like to even be in that position, like we were dealing with software on computers that weren't even made for gaming. Just imagine being able to make a game on a system that's made for games, and you're making the first ones. Like Shigeru had like the coolest job, and the tuning on Mario is just like, that's why it is a classic and it's legendary. It's perfect, and we kind of approached Doom in that same way. It needed to, this was our third big iteration of this technology that needed to feel as good as possible, because Doom was the first and maybe only game that we ever said we need to make the best thing that we can imagine playing in this game. This is the one. And that is why it was a year. Like Wolfenstein, 4 months, Doom, solid year, and that was all tuning and new technology and R&D and all kinds of stuff. But like the movement was where everything mattered. And so that tuning of Doom Guy moving around and everything was everything for the game.
It still feels so good today, just so natural and smooth. It really does.
Yeah. I mean, that's just a lot of polish.
Yeah.
Hey John, I've seen Wolf 3D and Doom compared in level design to dungeon crawlers, and having played a few dungeon crawlers of the era, I can see the connection. Were dungeon crawling games in D&D an influence? So D&D was an influence story-wise with Doom. Dungeon crawlers were, like, let's say dungeon crawlers would have been an influence on, say, Wolf 3D, only because up until Wolfenstein 3D and Spear of Destiny, every game that was made in 3D before that point was 90-degree hallways. They were basically a maze game genre, and Wolfenstein was like the ultimate maze game. Because maze games were like, that was the thing. Starting in
and
the
you even
arcades.
had the Pac-Man secret level.
Exactly.
The ultimate maze game inside the ultimate maze game.
Exactly. Yeah. So like that was a reference to just a second.
Sure.
So yeah, so that is the reference to just like, this is a maze game. This is the best one that we've played or have ever seen. we're gonna put like the best design maze game inside of ours. You know, like we put Pac-Man as the secret level of Wolfenstein, and that was, you know, but then Doom changed everything. You know, that was like making stuff that we'd never seen ever before. That's a whole nother world.
Right.
But yeah, so I think that we have to wrap up because it's been an hour and a half.
Oh, geez,
It's
has
been
wow.
great.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
I keep going forever.
Well, whenever we talk, it's kind of like this, you know. It's really fun to talk. I mean, I'm a game historian, but so are you. And hearing all of these stories is just so much fun. And like I said, I've interviewed you, I don't even know how many times now. I'm going to count this since we both asked each other questions. But I always learn new stuff, and I think that's great. So thank you very much, everyone, for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, thanks for being on, and thanks for making this amazing documentary because it is going to kick ass.
Oh yeah, man! I have a great team. We've got Richard Moss. I know you've talked to him.
Yeah,
for his
God, I love
books.
his secret history of Matt games.
Yeah, someone had to write that book, and now he's doing Shareware Heroes. I'm just as excited to read that.
Yeah, I worked with him on that.
Yeah, and you know, Fundamental and Creator VC. I mean, like you said, I think you even said it on Twitter, like, or no, it was in the AMA we did a week or so ago on Reddit. Yeah. If you've liked, you know, In Search of Darkness, In Search of Tomorrow, just these really thorough explanations of a genre of media. Yeah, just FPS will be right in line with those.
Yeah, because it's the people who made those games. And we're influenced by the games. It's this feedback loop. It's never stopping. You know? You'll never get tired of it.
Recursion. We'll use a programming term. It's just recursion.
It's a completely recursive documentary. You got to get into
it. That's right. That's right.
Cool. Well, thanks. You know, thanks a lot for being here, and thanks everybody for watching the stream. It's our first one on YouTube, and it's great to see so many people here, and hope everybody had a really good time hearing us talk about FPS history, and maybe people learn some stuff, and hopefully we can do this again.
Yeah, no, that'd be fun anytime. Great questions from your chat too.
Yeah, really great questions. Thanks everybody, and I guess that's a wrap, and we'll see you next time. All right, take it easy. Bye.